Investigators say suspected Golden State Killer Joseph DeAngelo was hiding in plain sight.
We found the needle in the haystack, and it was right here in Sacramento.
Right here in the modest house with a pristine yard in the Sacramento suburb of Citrus Heights.
How did that feel when finally, after all of these years later, you had your guy?
It was a surreal moment for me. Finally, I am seeing the face of this guy that I've only known with a mask on.
Investigator Paul Holes has spent most of his career trying to catch the elusive masked monster. He says DeAngelo's DNA matches the DNA gathered from decades worth of rape kits, leading him to believe the portly old grandfather is the grisly serial killer.
What did you think of that face that you saw?
Well, when I was looking at him, he had been arrested and placed in the interview room, and I looked at him through the TV monitor, and I saw a defeated man. He realized he had been caught. He did not say anything, nor did he deny anything. He just sat there, and there's numerous attempts to engage with him.
What did you make of that?
He was sitting there biding his time. He was strategizing. He's listening to the questions, trying to figure out what we knew about him, and ultimately try to enact a strategy that would help himself out.
Now the cul-de-sac where DeAngelo lived is a crime scene. Crime Watch Daily has confirmed he bought the house in 1979 and lived here with his wife and 3 daughters. His youngest was born in 1986, the same year investigators believe he committed his last murder. A swarm of FBI agents, cops, and sheriff's deputies are searching for any additional physical evidence that could bolster the state's case.
When you first saw the home he was living in for all these years, what he thought was hidden and just under the radar, what did you first make of it? Was it immaculate like his backyard?
The outside appearance of the house was very different from the inside, and the inside is what I would call just sort of an organized clutter. So I took that and I said, this guy, he's putting on the facade. The outside that people can see, of course, is this nicely manicured lawn that blends into a nice middle-class neighborhood. But inside, nobody can see it. I'm looking at him moving through that house, sitting down at this desk where he was building a model airplane that ultimately he could fly.
DeAngelo's wife, a divorce attorney, and their 3 daughters were not living at the house when the suspected Golden State Killer was arrested. DeAngelo's house has become a sort of instant tourist attraction. Looky-loos trying to get a glimpse at that place where the alleged Golden State Killer lived. The folks who live in the neighborhood knew him simply as Joe, but one neighbor had a different name for him.
We immediately started calling him Freak because we didn't know what his name was, and he would always be on the driveway kind of freaking out.
That's Natalia. She doesn't want her last name used. She lives across the street from DeAngelo and claims his angry rampages against himself, yes, against himself, were epic.
When he would go on those rampages with screaming at himself, and it was kind of uncomfortable to be around that because we never knew where it was going. So we would go retreat back into our house, and you could still hear him ranting and screaming from inside the house. That's how loud he was.
Natalia tells me in between the freakouts, DeAngelo appeared to be a good father.
He had an adult daughter. He was a typical grandfather with his granddaughter. On Halloween, he used to take his granddaughter trick-or-treating.
So you saw 2 different sides of him, the yelling, what you referred to as the freak moments, and then an endearing grandpa.
That's correct, yeah.
Over DeAngelo's back fence, on the next street over, Grant, who doesn't want his last name used either, describes his neighbor as a paranoid old curmudgeon.
He would yell at us if we got too close to his fence line. He would say that we were spying on him or maybe throwing things onto his property. It wasn't uncommon to hear him yelling at his wife, yelling at his kids, yelling at himself, and that was the scariest. I remember he would have arguments with himself loudly and violently.
When you said violent argument with himself, how so?
Screaming, "I'll kill you," or arguing something about killing somebody. Lots of cussing, lots of cussing.
Grant claims his family had a couple of scary confrontations with DeAngelo.
This one message was a death threat that was left anonymously. The threat said, "If you don't get rid of your dog, I'll deliver a load of death to your family." And my dad immediately recognized that it was Joe's voice on the answer machine tape. Joe came out of his house, said that the dog was being too loud, and that's why he left the message. My mom had an incident with him in 2001 where she was doing yard work in her backyard early on a Sunday morning, and Joe came over from his house, let himself into our side gate and into our backyard, and confronted my mom in the backyard and just started yelling at her, and it terrified her.
Were you or your husband home at the time of the arrest?
I was home. My husband was off on business.
What was his reaction?
I told him, I said, "You know, freak, they hauled him away." And he was pretty shocked.
Investigators say during his reign of terror, Joseph DeAngelo committed at least 12 murders and raped more than 50 women up and down the state of California. Cops say he also terrified and tortured his victims. Authorities claim Sherry Domingo and her boyfriend Gregory Sanchez were among his most brutal.
My mom and Greg were killed in our home in Goleta, California on July 27th, 1981.
Sherry's daughter Debbie might have been the third victim that night if it wasn't for an active teenage rebellion that had her spending the night with a friend.
Normally I would have been at the house. A realtor came in on Monday morning and found the bodies and called the police.
Sherry's arms and ankles were bruised, indicating she was hogtied. She and her boyfriend were brutally bludgeoned to death. And for 5 more years, the Golden State Killer continued his fiendish campaign of terror.
He terrorized the state from top to bottom.
Orange County District Attorney Tony Rackauckus says there is a possibility all of DeAngelo's alleged crimes in different jurisdictions could be combined into one trial.
As far as where it's going to be tried and by whom and who's going to be on the trial team, that decision is going to be made in conference with the other DAs who are involved.
And remember the physical description of the killer's shortcomings.
Extremely small penis.
A judge in Sacramento just ordered DeAngelo provide photo evidence of his private parts. His attorneys are fighting it, arguing that violates his Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination. And another thing that is sure to come up in the trial. Remember how the masked man yelled out, "I hate you, Bonnie," during his brutal attacks? Cops have now discovered DeAngelo was once actually engaged to a Bonnie.
Did you ever find Bonnie?
I have not spoken with Bonnie.
But you know where she is. Has she come forward? Has she said anything?
That is under active investigation.
We tracked down Bonnie, but her brother told us she was out of the country. He also confirmed she was once engaged to DeAngelo, but broke it off for what he called good reasons. Her brother did not elaborate. Crime Watch Daily also requested an interview with DeAngelo behind bars. We were told he declined. The 72-year-old DeAngelo hasn't yet entered a plea in a trial process that could take years, facing his alleged victims in court, as well as the relentless DNA hunter who searched every corner of the Golden State seeking justice.
And as a dad and just on a human level, man to man, what would you say?
And I can't even necessarily say it on camera because what he did was so horrible. Just to tell him, you know, you are a true monster and you deserve everything that you have coming to you.
I'm Chris Hansen. If you like this story, make sure you tune in every day to Crime Watch Daily. You can find where the show airs in your city at crimewatchdaily.com. Watch it live or record it on your DVR and watch it at night. And to all those criminals out there, remember, we are watching.